Stai per assistere a un'intervista tra Big Luca e Michael Francese, registrata a maggio 2020. In questo video scoprirai diverse pillole di mindset, gestione delle relazioni personali, gestione del team e gestione dei propri soldi. Buona visione.
What's the time in California?
It's a little after 9 a.m., but I'm an early riser. I've been up for a couple hours.
Okay, so Yeti.
What time is it there?
It's 8 p.m. 8 p.m. in the night. In the evening.
Okay.
Okay, so hi everybody. This is Big Luca, and today I am interviewing Michael Francese, who has a very interesting past and present, by the way. He was a capo regime in the Colombo family in New York, but I will not say anything. I will just let him introduce himself and talk to us about his life. So, Michael, introduce yourself.
Well, you said it, Luca. My name is Michael Francis, and I was a former capo regime in the Colombo family, one of the 5 New York Mafia La Cosa Nostra families. My dad was the underboss of that family during the 1960s. So I kind of grew up in that life, even though my dad originally didn't want that life for me. He wanted me to go to school, get an education. And I was on that road. I was a sophomore in college when my dad drew a 50-year prison sentence for masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies, a crime that until today I believe he was framed and innocent of. So at that point in time, Joe Colombo kind of took me under his wing, started to meet a lot of my dad's friends. You know, obviously I knew them, grew up with many of them, but got a little more serious. I lost interest in school, wanted to help my dad get out of prison. So I visited him in Leavenworth Penitentiary where he was doing his time. And during a conversation there, told him I was leaving school. And at that time he said, well, if you're gonna be on the street, I want you the right way. And he proposed me for membership in the family. I was 21 years old at that point. So that's how it started for me. And 3 or 4 years later, I took an oath, October 31st, 1975, and became a made member in the Colombo family. That's how it started for me.
Okay. And tell me about the ritual. How does that work when you get made?
Well, it's a very solemn ceremony. You know, first you have to prove yourself. I was a recruit for almost 2 years. I had to prove myself worthy of becoming a member. And once I did that to their satisfaction, it was a very solemn ceremony. There were 6 of us that night that took the oath. We walked into a room individually. The boss was seated at the head of like a horseshoe configuration. Underboss and consigliere, you know, 2 important positions to his left and right. And all the capo regimes were alongside of them. So I walked down the aisle, stood in front of the boss, held out my hand. He took a knife, cut my finger. Some blood dropped on the floor. This is a blood oath. I cupped my hands. He took a picture of a saint, Catholic altar card, put it in my hands, lit it aflame. Didn't hurt, it burned quickly. It was merely symbolic. And he said, tonight, Michael Francis, you are born again into a new life, into La Cosa Nostra. And violate what you know about this life, betray your brothers and you'll die. Burn in hell like the saint is burning in your hands. He said, do you accept? And I said, yes, I do. And that's how it started for me. The other 5 guys went in, they all took the oath, and that's how it starts. That's it. Very simple. Doesn't last too long, but very serious.
And how long did it take you to get from the time you kind of wanted to join the mob to the time you were made officially, so you became a made man? How long did it pass?
It took me about 2 years. I was a recruit for 2 years, a little less than that, but approximately 2 years.
And you were in New York at the time, Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn was our base at that time, the base of the Colombo family. But you know, I was all over New York, obviously, but Brooklyn was our home base.
Okay, so of course the question that people ask is, what did you do during those 2 years to prove yourself worthy? What did your work consist of? What did you have to do in order to prove yourself in the eyes of the people that were above you at the time?
Well, obviously, you try to prove yourself a number of ways. You kind of set your own level in that life. For me, you know, I was you know, a fairly good earner at that point. I had a head for business, and I knew how to use that life to benefit me in business. So it kind of started out that way. And, you know, look, to be perfectly honest with you, I think everybody knows, you know, that life is very violent at times. And if you're part of the life, you're part of the violence, and you got to prove yourself in that regard too. So it's kind of two-way street. Some people never get past that level, and they kind of stay at a level where the rest of the family kind of supports them, and they do that kind of work. And then a guy like me and a few others, we prove ourselves worthy in a number of ways, where we also know how to earn some money for the family. So I kind of did it both ways.
Okay, so about money, I'm cognizant of the fact you were one of the highest earner ever of the mob. I mean, you were making something like 8 millions a week or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the government and the media always kind of pegged me as biggest earner since Al Capone. I mean, that's their description, not necessarily mine. But I was fortunate. Like I said, I knew how to use that life to benefit me in business, and I'd had both illegal and legal businesses. But the biggest enterprise or the biggest scam I ever pulled off was, along with one other gentleman, my partner at the time, we devised a scheme to defraud the federal and state governments at a tax on every gallon of gasoline. And I ran that for about 8 years. I actually had members from the Russian mob were my partners in that. They were in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. And at the height of our operation, I had over I had 18 companies that were licensed to collect tax on every gallon of gasoline. And at the height of my operation, we were selling 500 million gallons of gas a month, and we were taking down 30, 40, 50, 30 or 40 cents a gallon, whatever the market would bear. So at one point in time, we averaged $7-8 million a week that was coming into our operation. So it was a big deal.
It was a big deal. So how much money did you have during that time? Like, how much money was sitting in your bank account?
Well, I mean, I had a lot of bank accounts here, and I had some bank accounts overseas because we were sending a lot of money out of the country, obviously, in Austria and other places. But, I mean, I always sat on 50, 70, 80 million. At times I had 100 million available to me. Personally, it was big numbers, big numbers. I mean, the money was flowing daily.
That's a lot of money. I mean, there are billionaires that don't have 100 million cash available.
Well, they weren't stealing gas tax money. They were doing it the right way. But we had a lot of cash because, by design, a lot of the stations that we operated, we collected cash from them. Back then, when I was operating in the 70s and 80s, you didn't have as much credit card, business as you do today. Back then, it was a lot of cash. And so there was then, what could I tell you? We had a lot of cash.
You had a lot of cash. Yeah. I mean, the challenge nowadays when you do these things is actually with the cash, how to spend it. Because, for example, in Italy, pretty much nobody accepts cash. I mean, if you walk into a store with $5,000 cash, you get arrested. There is no way. So a lot of, people in the drug business, when they release interviews or, people that kind of, they will tell you that one of the reasons they live the high life and they go to clubs and they got a lot of women is that they don't have any other way to spend the cash. And also they know that it's going to end very soon, so they just leave it off. And how did you live through that time? Did you know you were going to get caught? You felt invincible? How did you make sense of it?
Well, I didn't feel invincible. I knew that I became a major target of law enforcement. I mean, I had 17 or 18 arrests. I actually had 7 indictments, 2 federal racketeering indictments and a bunch of states indictments. But so I knew I wasn't invincible, but I was fortunate in that I understood the law. I knew how to defend myself. I had enough money for, the best representation at that time. And I had a good record of winning. So, and I insulated myself pretty well between myself and the guys on the street doing a lot of the work that could have got me in trouble. So, I put the proper steps in place. I learned from some of the mistakes my father had made to try not to, to duplicate that. So, but I knew at some point in time, I was going to go down for something because in this country, America, they're never going to let you go. I mean, they'll just stay on it. They got all the time, all the money, and they're relentless in that regard. But up until, the time when I eventually did go down, I had a pretty good record. So, and I had a lot of legitimate businesses too. So for me, I was able to support my lifestyle legitimately, paid my taxes. I had 2 automobile dealerships. I had a big leasing company. I owned a film production and distribution company out in California. So I had good cash flow, and I was able to support my lifestyle that way. So, I planned it that way too.
Okay. So I'm curious, how many degrees of separation did you have between you and the man doing the work in order not to get caught?
Well, it wasn't so much, I was pretty hands-on with the guys around me, with my crew, but I was very careful, technologically. I didn't get caught on wiretaps. I didn't get caught on bugging devices. And that's powerful evidence. I always knew that I was very careful with that, but I always knew my liability was with the guys around me. So I tried to pick the guys that I thought were going to be, stand-up guys. As it turned out, in the end, my partner in the gas business was the one who became an informant and testified against me. And but I didn't have a lot of degrees of separation. I just kept a pretty tight hold on the guys around me. I watched them carefully, so I knew if anybody was going to go down, I was pretty aware of their personality, their character. I knew who was strong, who was weak. So I treated them in that way. The guys that were a little weaker, I didn't discuss certain things with them. I didn't do certain things with them. The guys that I felt were stronger, I had a little bit more confidence in. So it was really a personality and character issue with me.
Okay, and how did you choose them? Like, what is a telltale sign of somebody that you know is not dependable, that you know that if somebody pressures them is going to rot?
Well, in certain situations and circumstances, if you're paying attention, like I had to be, I always had to be aware of what was going on around me. You can pretty well, peg somebody's personality. Guy talks too much, guy's always trying to prove himself verbally, telling you what a stand-up guy he is, what a good guy he is, and then just give them certain assignments and see how they react. And I'd know if they were weak or not, because in that life, you have some volatile situations and you put them in, you give them, a job to do that, you see how they can handle it. It might be a menial job, but the way they handle it is important. So, it was, and I had a big crew, but the crew around me, my intimate crew, was very tight. And those are the guys I really relied on. So maybe 4 guys that I really felt comfortable with. The guy that eventually testified against me, I never felt comfortable with him. I always kind of tried to insulate myself from him in many ways. But, he was part of the architect of the gas tax scheme. So he was valuable to me, because we were making so much money. So it was kind of a fine line I had to thread with him. But it's really knowing your people and judging their personality. That's so important. That's how I viewed it anyway.
Yeah. So you really have to be great at reading people, which is the same in business. I mean, it's with the only difference that in business you lose money, in that life you can lose your life. So and how did you manage your people? Like what behavior did you have with them? Did you command them? Did you scream at them? Did you talk to them respectfully? How did you get them to do what had to be done, but in a respectful way for the long term?
It's a good question, Luca. People have told me throughout the years that I was such a brilliant businessman because I had all of these different things going and I had a good level of success. I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not a brilliant businessman, because there's certain things in business that I just don't like to do, and they're important, and I won't do them. But my real talent was finding the right people to fill those positions and then motivating them, getting them to believe in me, getting them to really work hard. Because my motto always was to do what I do best and delegate the rest. And what I did best was find the right people, put them in the right position, and motivate them. And not out of fear. I mean, the fear was always there because they knew who I was. And there were times when I had to show them that I was capable of doing what I had to do. They weren't the target, but somebody else might have been. And they knew that if I said something, I was serious about it. So don't mess with me. It was that kind of a thing. But I never had to really do that directly with them. I believe in getting people to love you, getting people to like you, breeding the loyalty. Fear doesn't breed a real loyalty. Because I'm going to tell you what happened. I'll give you a perfect example. Prior to the 1980s, the loyalty in that life to a great regard in my former life, La Cosa Nostra, was built a lot on fear, because people were afraid if they didn't toe the line, or if they made a mistake, they could pay for it with their lives, or something, a little less serious, but nevertheless serious. What happened in the mid 80s in our country, when the government started to devise all these laws, the racketeering law, the Bail Reform Act, the Sentencing Reform Act, what happened is the fear from these guys transferred from the family to the government, because the government now said, hey, you're either going to cooperate with us, or under this racketeering law, we're going to put you away for the rest of your life. That's it. And so that fear was transferred. So it wasn't a genuine fear. If you love somebody, you'll say, okay, well, that's the price I have to pay because I love this person. But if you're afraid of them, and that fear now transfers to somebody else, well, your loyalty is going to go to the person you fear the most. And that happened to be the government. That's why my life collapsed in the 80s. And the government figured that out. The guys on the street did not. So to me, the guys that were loyal to me were the guys that really loved me. The guys that were separated from me, and their fear then became that of the government, and they turned on me. So my theory all along was right. It was correct. And when I saw that happening, that's when I decided it's time to make a break here, because this life is in trouble.
Wow. Okay. So they will go to the person that they fear the most if they don't love you. That's powerful. And how did you deal with, because the problem, for example, you have in business is that somebody will sooner or later be insubordinate. Like they will not do what I tell them to do. The problem is that I cannot, take out a gun and just put it on the table. So sometimes you want to scream, or sometimes you really want to show that you can be dangerous to an extent, and it's challenging. Did you, like in business, how do you do that in business? How would you assert yourself in business so that people know you're dangerous, but then you don't have guns? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, in normal business, I think it's, you do things the right way. You set examples. The guy doesn't toe the line, you fire him. That's it. You're done. You're out. On the street, a little bit different. What I did is, if I had to make an example of somebody, it was somebody that wasn't close enough to me to hurt me. And the ones that were close enough to me said, okay, I can't cross this guy, because if he says something, he means it. So I was careful who to exert myself with, and I put, if I had because I had a lot of people working for me. When I was running that business, I had over 300 people, associates of mine, and so on and so forth, in the gas business and various businesses that I had. So I like I said, my talent was to put the right people in the right place. And those that I didn't value that much were kind of on the outskirts. So if I had to make an example of somebody, hey, this guy, you're out, whatever had to be done at that time.
Yeah.
So again, for me, it was all about picking the right people. It was about knowing their character, their personality. In that life, it's extremely important, because it's the people around you that are going to hurt you or take you to the top. You're only as good as the people around you, Luca. That's what I found out. So you better be, on the street, you better be right in who you select.
Yeah, same thing in business. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Same way in business.
One wrong person could just screw your organization over. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Absolutely. In business is very important. You have to have the right people in the right place. You got to know them, because you're right. One disloyal person can do a lot of damage. So, even now, in my business now, I run a very tight ship. I have people around me, mostly family. And at least if they screw up, I can get on them a little bit. I know they're not going anywhere, and they'll correct themselves. And look, there's times when I had family around me where I had to let them go also. I said, look, you're my family. I love you, but you're no good in this position. Can't have you here. You're out. You got to be kind of cold in business at times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's very hard to do it with family. That's why I don't work with friends, and I don't work with family, because you have no control over them. I mean, if I tell my mom not to do something, it's, try to tell your wife not to do something. I mean, it just doesn't work. Right.
Exactly. exactly. I totally agree.
So another question about stealing. Of course, we're talking about stealing, so the question maybe will be ridiculous. But anyway, so people that work with you, do you believe that if they're giving a chance to, they will steal from you, and you have to continuously watch them even after years that they've been working for you, or after a few years or a few months, they can kind of be let alone and you trust them implicitly? How do you?
Yeah. You know, I'll give you a good example. That's a good question. You got to be careful when people are counting your money, even the people closest to you. I had a guy that I was very close to. His name was Frankie. He's passed on now. Very close to him, very close to his family. And he had run into some trouble in a business that he had. I was partners with him, but it wasn't doing well. So when I had the gas business, I said to him, Frankie, look, I love you and love your family. I said, I'm going to give you a job. I want you to go around to the gas stations. Just go around to the stations and pick up the money. That's it. They know what to do. They hand it to you. You bring it to me. I said, I'm going to pay you $3,000 a week. So get your car, pick up the gas stations, right? In cash. Well, after about 6 months, he comes to me and he says, you know, I think he wouldn't steal because he was close. He said, but I think I need a raise. I said, a raise? I said, do you think you're worth $3,000 a week? I can get somebody to do that for $300 a week. I said, I'm doing you a favor. I said, but your problem now is you're counting my money. And it's already getting into your head that I'm making this much money, so you think you're entitled to more. I said, I'll tell you what, you're not doing this anymore. Go find a job. And I made him, I fired him. I took him back, but I showed him, I said, don't count my money. If I'm doing something right for you, I said, you don't know what my responsibilities and my obligations are. I said, but I built this business. I put you to work. I did a favor for you. Don't count my money. And we never had that issue again. So, you know, sometimes you got to be, you got to watch even your closest people. You know, my own brother, you know, I had trouble with him because they're counting your money. When money is a terrible separator of people, no matter how close they are to you. You really have to know how to manage the people around you that are close to you when it comes to money, because everybody starts counting it, and
Oh yeah, I know.
that's tough.
Yeah. So I have a comfortable financial situation myself. I'm 28, and I became a millionaire at 25. And people do count money. I mean, if when the shit hits the fan, you know, they come to Papa. They're like,
Sure.
you know, don't you have money? Can you lend me some money? And
Sure.
it's tough, and you have to learn how to say no. Because otherwise, you know, it's like honey for bees. They just all come to you, and they're entitled sometimes, especially family members. So you have to draw very strong boundaries, at least in my experience.
Well, my policy with family, if they come to me to borrow money and I decide to give it to them, I just immediately write it off. That's it. It's my mistake. If I get paid, I don't, and I never bring it up again, because what I'll tell them is, you know, I mean, I had a recent example. I lent a relative of mine money. He made a deal to pay me back. He didn't keep his word. Okay. He came to me maybe 6-7 months later, had a little pang conscience and said, you know, I said, it's okay. I said, that money is yours. I don't ever want to see it again. I said, but don't ever come to me again. You're done as far as that. So good luck. I don't care what the situation is. Don't ever come back to me again. So I kind of write it off. And that's my policy now, because I got burnt with my family so bad, you know, in my time in that life when I was giving money out. Because I was pretty free with my money, Luke. I'll be honest with you. I gave it out. I let people around me earn, which is so important on the street, because money buys loyalty too. If you don't let people earn around you, forget it. You're in trouble on the street if you're an earner. You got to let people earn. But, you know, I got beat so many times that now my policy is, once I give it to you, I write it off mentally. It's over with. So, but don't ever come back to me again if you don't pay me.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, I'm not going to lend you money. It's anything. It's a gift.
Yeah.
You know, and do you like sever the relationship completely if somebody doesn't pay you back? I mean, you're never going to speak with that person again. How do you?
No, I don't do that, because, you know, family is important to me. I just, you know, my policy is, hey, look, I'm over 21. I'm an adult. I know the deal. If I'm doing something, it's on me. It's not on you anymore. It's just you made a mistake with me, so then don't ever come back to me in that situation again. But I move on like nothing ever happened. I never even bring it up. I won't bring it up. I don't want it to interfere, because then what happens if you have an issue with that family member, it makes the other family people uncomfortable, and then you're starting something with everybody. So, I even tell my wife that. I said, look, wrote it off. It's over with. I don't care. Not a problem. Just life goes on, because it's my mistake. It's not theirs. It's mine. I gave it to you. And, it's the same in a business situation. If I made a bad business deal, it's on me. Even if somebody was dishonest for me, it's on me, because I should know better. So, I always found out, Luca, if you take responsibility for everything that goes wrong, you take it on yourself, it's a great teacher, because then you really know not to do that again. If you blame somebody else, you could say, well, it wasn't my fault, it was his. Maybe it'll be okay the next time. I like to take every mistake that I make is totally on me and I've done that for years now, because, I've been through a lot in my life, so I understand. So if I make a mistake at this point, it's on me. It's not on the other person.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's just hard, though. I mean, what about like people? I mean, nowadays you're living a different life completely.
Yes.
What happens in your mind, having lived through your previous life, when somebody like disrespects you?
Well, I haven't had much of that to worry about. I live in California, where there's a different mentality out here. People, I just avoid situations like that. I mean, I can't really say that I've been disrespected. I haven't come into that situation. And if it's somebody that doesn't know who I am, like, I'll give you an example. I was driving with my brother-in-law. We were driving a Mercedes, and we pulled next to somebody, and these two yuppie guys in the car that are also in the Mercedes. And I think my brother-in-law tried to back out, and I don't know what happened. We didn't hit, but they got upset, and they rolled down their window and they started cursing, you effing this and you effing that. I said, what? In New York, you do that, you better be ready to fight. You're not going to get away with that stuff. So, I mean, I got out, and I'll be honest with you, and I went up to them, and I went to, and they got scared, then they closed the window and they were ready to drive away, but they didn't know who I was. It wasn't like, I'm disrespecting Michael Franzese, but it's just the mentality out here, so I've gotten over that, and I don't put myself in situations where I have to worry about that. But, fortunately, Luke, you learn with age, you get a little bit wiser, especially when you went through a lot, and you take things a little bit more calmer. So I don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, it's true. Actually, you don't know that, but I used to be a bouncer in the UK. I used to be a big guy beating people up. And for money, I mean, I didn't have any money. I was studying in the UK, and I ran out of money. My mom gave me money to study there, and I just, I just wasted it in 1 year. And so I was practicing Krav Maga and self-defense, and I was a big guy and everything. And so I started doing doors in the UK, which is very, very rough. Mm-hmm. And it really gets into, it was a shit situation, because you start becoming aggressive and everything around you is violent and violent and violent. And it really triggers you. And it was actually hard to give that up. I mean, I had colleagues making 6 figures with normal jobs, going back on doors, and they were 50 because they were like, for the adrenaline and the thrill of it.
Right.
A lot of people die for heart attack on doors. Imagine that?
You got to pick your lifestyle carefully. Let's put it that way. Look, I saw so many things happen on the street, and I tell you, sometimes it amazes me that I survived, everything that we had to go through. Not only me, but, a lot of guys didn't survive. But it's a tough life. It really is. And then the adjustment, being out of that life and getting into somewhat of a normal situation, it's a big transition. It's not easy. And that's why, I speak to a lot of these gangbangers, and I talk to a lot of juveniles and really try to lead them out. But I tell law enforcement and people that I work with trying to help these kids, I said, you can't just tell a kid, who's grown up in a neighborhood and this kind of lifestyle just to walk away. I said, it's dangerous for them. Mentally, it's hard for them to make the break. I said, this is a transition period, and they need help, and they need counsel, and they need, they need a a lot of support to get past it. I did, I mean, I was a bit older, and I had a better understanding, but the transition was still very hard for me, very hard.
So I'm curious about the transition money-wise, because of course there is a difference between making 20 million a month, and I don't know how much money you're making now. I don't know if you want to share it, but I believe it's less.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a bit less. So,
Yes.
like, did you miss it? How do you make sense of it? I mean, you had your own plane, you had a helicopter, you had houses, you had everything, and now you cannot afford a plane. I believe, I don't know. So how do you make sense of it? Do you miss having a lot of money? Did you realize that having that much money is useless compared to having a family and staying calm and settled in California and living a normal life? How do you?
Yeah, look, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I enjoyed knowing I had the money that I had, and I had all the toys. I had the plane and the helicopter, and I had a couple of boats and all of that. But I didn't have peace of mind because I was constantly being hunted. So I had to worry about people on the street. I had to worry about law enforcement. So that came along with it at that point because of the way I was earning the money. But, today I'm not complaining. I mean, I'm comfortable. I live in a nice house. I drive a good car. My family has food on the table. We take vacations. So, I'm okay in that regard. Um, I think for me now, it's more of having the security of just knowing I have a lot of money, because I like having a lot of money. It's not that I like spending a lot of money, but I like having it, and now, I mean, at this point in my life, I mean, I would take it and enjoy it with my wife. My wife and I like to vacation and do certain things, and we like the freedom of that. So, money in our country, in America, in free nations, equates to freedom.
Yeah.
Money you have in many ways, the more freedom you have to do what you like. So, I mean, I look at it that way. And also, my wife and I like to be generous with our money. I'm a person of faith. I'm a Christian. So we like to help other people with it. So in that regard, that's why I enjoy money. Back then, it was just accumulating the money, having the money, seeing the money. It was a high, more than spending it. It was just knowing I got it, knowing I was able to generate that kind of money. It was a real high for me. Some people get high on drugs and alcohol. I got high on money. That's just what it was.
And it doesn't make a difference. I mean, once you have like 60, if you got 70, what's the difference, right? 50, 70 million, I mean, it doesn't change.
It doesn't change your lifestyle, unless you want to go out and buy, buildings for $1 billion. It doesn't change your lifestyle one bit. When you reach a certain level, you can only live a certain way. So, but me, it was just accumulating the money, knowing that I was able to generate it. It was a high back then, honestly.
Oh, no, I totally get the high.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a story. Once I was in a helicopter with my partner, coming back from picking up. We had $400,000 or $500,000 in our helicopter, and we flew around the Statue of Liberty and started throwing the money out to the people below. I mean, that's a high. We were throwing $20 bills down. They were falling over themselves trying to get it. So when you reach that point in your life, it's like a high. I mean, what could I say?
It is. So how much money did you spend every month for your lifestyle? Give me a number.
Well, unfortunately, I look back and I say this was dumb, but I enjoyed it. In that life, every night I was out in a club. Every night we do our business during the day, and then at night it's more business, but you did it in a nightclub, in a place. So, and I always used to pick up the tab. So, I'd spend $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 a night, depending upon where the heck we were, consistently. So that's where a lot of my, cash went. I was just spending money on playthings like that. Where I had a big crew, guys would come around me, I'd pick up the tab, and that was it. So, but my actual lifestyle, I mean, I had a big house. I had a 10,000 square foot house that I paid cash for. So I didn't really have a monthly pay. I didn't like to have monthly payments. Right. I owned a dealership, so I drove my cars. I didn't, I drove them off the lot. I bought a car and I drove it, and then I traded in, took another one. So my monthly nut was not that bad because I paid cash for most everything that I had. So, but my lifestyle was expensive because I was a mob guy, and we just spent a lot of money.
Right.
But under normal, let's say if I was a normal guy with the kind of, it would have probably been about maybe 50 grand a month, you know. It wasn't Mike Tyson money where the guy had to spend, you know, 100,000 a month. I mean, I wasn't in that category. Didn't need to. I had a boat, I bought it. I had a plane, I bought it. I had a helicopter, I bought it. So I didn't have, you know, I had a lot of cash to buy things.
Right. Wow. $100 million in cash. That's, you know, well, I am on different figures, but I can kind of, I mean, to me, once you get to the point in which you have available every month, like 30 grand, you're okay. That's me. I don't know. Right now, I mean, I used to spend a lot of money, and now I'm approaching 30, and I'm starting to make a few changes in my life. Like, for example, I'm investing more, saving more. And I was like, if I had started 5-6 years ago with the stock market, now my money would have been much higher. And right now, I mean, I fly private in Europe sometimes, and I always fly first class internationally. Mm-hmm. And, you know, since I am from a poor background, my family was actually quite wealthy since the time, up to the time I was 10, and then they divorced. And of course, you know, you can kind of imagine situation crumbled. So once I started making money when I was like 22, 23 or 24, I don't remember which, I really enjoyed myself, you know, with hotels and everything else. And you go through phases. And right now I'm in a phase in which I just got a new villa. I pay rent. I don't own the property because I like to be mobile and with my wife. And, you know, we're like, we could go traveling around. Sometimes we don't really feel like to, and we just stay home and have a glass of champagne, but it's all calmer, you know, than before.
Right. Well, you know, you do go through phases. Obviously, when you're younger and you got the thrill of the money and you want to spend it and do things. I mean, I went through that. But now, you know, it's not necessary. It's just things become less important and other things become more important, you know. But my lifestyle out now is totally different than when it was, you know, back in New York and when I had, you know, style. It's just totally different. It's better. It's better. So, you know, and I earn my money and I put away what I need to and I spend what I need to. Look, you can't take it all with you, so you may as well enjoy it. That I believe in enjoying the fruits of my labor.
Yeah.
And you know, we don't have an elaborate lifestyle. We love going out to dinner. You know, we like to go on vacation. We go to Napa Valley into wine country and do stuff like that. So the freedom of being able to do that when you want to do that is worth more than anything else. So whatever kind of money you need to earn that allows you to have that lifestyle, that's all you need. That's all you need. That's you know, for me, I want to set my children up. So, you know, I put a little aside for that. I have a lot of kids and grandkids, but you know, other than that, it's all about comfort and freedom.
That's true.
Right now, a lot of people are struggling through this quarantine. I mean, This is tough. People losing their jobs, going on unemployment, businesses are closing. I don't know how much longer this country can remain, or this world can remain in a shutdown and not go into a serious depression.
Oh yeah,
it can't. So, but you know, I'm fortunate. You know, we're comfortable, so we can last. You know, for a length of time here. But there's others that are really, really struggling, and that's a shame. That's terrible, the position they've been put in.
Yeah, and I'm afraid the lockdown will last for longer than you guys think, because he kind of got to the US later. He had already got to Italy, and I was actually in Miami when the situation exploded. I was in Miami on the 25th of February with my wife, and Italy was already in deep shit. Like the thing was like coming up like badly. People were realizing that. And then it hit, and it was a lockdown in Italy, and the US was still taking the mickey out of it. Like, and I was like, guys, it's coming here as well. Just get prepared. So I flew to Dubai because I wanted to be in a place in which I have the legal right to reside. In the US, I was a tourist. So just, let's say, go home.
You got out in time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Donna actually remained there. And after 2 days, she was like, I'm coming to Dubai because the situation in Miami is not really calm anymore. You know, people were queuing and distancing when they were lining up to the pharmacy. People were starting to say, God bless you, like, you know, encouraging each other. So she was like, you know, let's meet in Dubai. Sure. And I don't believe the lockdown will be over in a month's time in the US. And I don't know how the economy will will handle it, because there is a lot of people without savings, and it's a tragedy. I've
Very,
talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. They're like,
it's very difficult. You know, a lot of people took a major hit in the market, and a lot of small businesses, I believe, will never reopen, no matter the government tries to give them some help. And, you know, we appreciate that, but you can't take a hit like this. I mean, you know, I have a show in Vegas that I don't know if we're ever going to reopen again, because who knows how long, even when Vegas opens up, the economy being the way it is, people being, you know, taking the losses, you know, Vegas is all about tourist trade. Who knows how fast people are going to be willing to go back or able to go back and spend money on, you know, tourism. I don't know, but it's very uncertain right now. Very uncertain. We don't have a lot of answers, but I believe if we don't open up, if we go another month, a whole month of May, it's going to be extremely difficult. I think we have to get open here, but are we? I don't know. You know, some very troubling news to me. You heard that, but in Korea, recently they reported that 51% of those people that had the virus and recovered caught it again.
yeah, Hong Kong, same
51%,
thing.
which means that even if they don't get sick, they're carriers. So if they're in a crowd and they pass it on to somebody else, that person, now we can go through another wave of this.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's happening in Hong Kong. So I don't know about the percentage, but basically they're putting Hong Kong again under lockdown. They're under the second lockdown. And the thing is that the psychology of it, I mean, the paradigm has changed. This is like my grandparents always stockpiling food because they went through Second World War. 50 years later, they would wake up and ask you, look, do we have pasta in the house? Yes. Yeah, but just go buy some more.
Yeah.
And now it's social distancing, and it will remain with us. So even flying, for example, I believe it will become just a luxury thing, just first class, because how can you fly in economy? All the people squeezed up.
Yeah.
If there is this virus and you have to, you know, do social distancing.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, this is life altering. It's going to stay with people for a long time. There's no doubt about that. But you know, how we're going to recover, how soon, is anybody's guess at this point. I mean, you know, I'm a speaker around the world, and I had 14 events postponed, so not canceled, but postponed. And I had a tour of the kingdom in June. We had, I think, about 18 cities. That's been postponed. And my promoter in the United Kingdom told him every major concert is postponed throughout all of 2020.
No, everything. I mean, they're postponing the Expo.
Yeah, Expo, the Olympics are postponed. I mean, this is life altering. Nobody's going to ever forget 2020. That's for sure.
Okay, so what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs in terms of money? And especially I'm interested in terms of life-work balance, if there is such a thing, because, you know, it happens to me that I work. My wife tells me, what are you thinking of? Thinking about work, money, work. I feel like if I stop thinking about it, the situation would just leap out of my hands. And so I am continuously focusing. What would you say about this?
Well, Luca, you and I share that same, you know, feeling. I have business on my brain 24/7 almost, even when I'm relaxing. So it's just part of who I am at this point. So I get that. But we're entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs are like that. You know, it's just a natural part of our being. But, you know, I counsel a lot of people. And now I'm going into personal and business coaching. I'm going to be doing that as a part of what I do. And, you know, I tell young people, I said, there's a couple of things that you got to realize. Number one, are you really an entrepreneur? Are you a business person, or are you an employee? Either one is not bad. You have to fit into one of those two. Some people are just not good running a business. They're never going to be good. Some people are better at taking orders and being a worker and using their talent in that way. So I really try to get to the bottom of that with somebody to find out what their lot in life really is. And if they're a business person, the first thing I tell them is, what do you want to do? And people, well, I want to open up a restaurant. Okay. And what do you want to do? Well, I want to serve good food. All right. Well, what's your plan? Well, you know, I want to get a good location and I want to serve good food. Now, I said, but that's not a business plan. Yeah. I tell people, look, you got to write down your business plan. You got to think this out. You got to write it down, and you got to keep it in front of you. So if this is the plan, once you perfect it, this is your plan. You got to be able to look at it so you don't deviate, you don't go off, and so on and so forth. You got to have a business plan. I'm not saying you can't amend it with the times when things change, but you got to have a plan that you got to stick to. You know, and then it's all about obviously having the right capital. I tell people, you don't have money, don't get involved. Just don't do it. If it's a business that you need to have a cushion and have money, and you don't have it yet, wait until you get it. Don't do it, because that's the biggest destroyer. You know that. If you can't withhold yourself through the bad times, you're going to go down.
Oh yeah, cash is king.
Yeah, you know, you got to, and then obviously put the right people in the right position, and make sure there's a market for what it is you're selling. You know, give you another example. I'm in the pizza business. You know, recently I have a partner who's been in the restaurant business for about 40 years, and he and I have been partners in different things successfully. So we sold the last restaurant, and he comes to me and he says, "Mike, I want to open up a pizza store." And I said, "Tony," I said, "everybody and their brother has pizza." I said, "Why are you going to be able to compete with them?" He says, "We have to have something that's going to separate us from everybody else." And so for a year and a half, he went out and researched, went all over the world, went to Italy, went different places and researched, and came back with a formula, because our idea is to franchise this at some point in time, okay? And he came up with a pizza and a system that separates us from every other pizza place out there. It has to be unique. Even in a crowded market, if you have something that's different and special, you have a shot. And I said, "You did it." I mean, it's terrific. You know, we call it Slices USA. We have opened up 3 stores now, and we're franchising, you know, all over the country. So, and basically at some point in time, we'd like to do an IPO and get out of it. That's the plan. So, but there again, we had a plan, separate us from the market, and be able to, because we know everybody loves pizza, but it still has to be different, has to separate us. So it was well thought out and well executed. And now we'll see what happens. But, you know, there's just certain steps that you have to follow. And you know this, Luca, you're successful, so you understand that. You got to stick to it, and you got to put in the work. You know, and that's it. I mean, my daughter, you know, is with, she's young, 21 years old, and her boyfriend's 22 years old. And, you know, I try to school him, and, you know, I tell him, she gets mad because he's working all the time. I said, "Well, why were you mad at him?" I said, "He's a young man. He's trying to make it in life. I got bills to pay. Let him work." "Well, I only see him twice a week." That's fine. It's okay.
Can't have
Let
it
him
both
work.
ways, you know.
Yeah, you can't have both ways. You want him to take you out to dinner? You want to go here and there? Let him work. You know, I believe that. You know, listen, you know, people used to say, you know, you're only young one time. When you get older, it gets more difficult. Do it when you're young and enjoy it when you're old. You know, a lot of people, "Oh, he's young, he's got time." No, you don't have time. Do it when you're young and enjoy it when you're old. And, you know, you seem to have followed that formula, which is great. And now don't waste your money. That's it. Put enough away so you can be comfortable, God forbid, in a time like this.
Oh, totally. I mean, I always say that, you know, when you're 20, especially in Italy, there is this wrong mindset that if your hair is not gray, nobody listens to you. Who the hell do you think you are? And then, you know, you're 20. "Oh, you're only 20. You should go to university. You're 19. What are you doing?" And then when you're around 30, people start saying, well, you're 30 already. "What do you mean already?" "Oh,
Yeah.
maybe you should have." "Yeah, I mean, you should do that. But maybe it was better to start 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you told me I was too young." So, and then I see my friends, for example, in Italy, already settled, families, kids. It's over. You know, career-wise, there is no, how the hell you're going to start a business? You work in 2 jobs, keeping food on the table. More power to you, but it's that your life is already kind of entangled. You know, it's, you know.
You know, those decisions you make when you're young are very, very important. No doubt about it. Very important. I got to tell you this. I love Italy. I mean, my wife and I vacation there. You know, we were in Capri not too long ago. It was paradise. I love Italy. I love my hometown. I love my heritage. My family's all from Napoli, from Naples. And, but Italy is just, you know, it's funny. When I first went there, I had a bunch of friends of mine that went, and they said, "Michael, try this restaurant. Go here, go there." We were in Rome. I said, look, I don't want to listen to any of you people. It's my home country. I want to do what I want to do. Don't give me any suggestions. I want to explore. Well, when we were in Rome, it was in August. It was beautiful. And we picked every cafe, you know, a lot of you eat outside, the outside cafes. We could not find a bad place. The food was great. Every place we went, the people were wonderful. We don't want to leave. I mean, I could see myself living there for a while, but it's just beautiful.
Oh, it's great for holiday. It's not great for business because people, you know, there is a negative prejudice in Italy about business.
Yeah, huh?
And about failure, especially if you fail, you know, people are going to point it out to you and I say, oh, you failed.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's known all over the world. I mean, in the US, if you fail, that's okay. You can reinvent yourself. It's in the blood of Americans. It's in the American dream, right?
Right.
It's part of success. In Italy, no. Oh, he did that. He failed. How did he think he was? I mean,
really? You know, it's funny you say that, Luca, because in the mob life, I experienced that. You know, when you're young in that life, you know, there's a lot of resentment from the old timers that have been there. If you're young and successful, you got your hands full. You got to watch out for the older guys. But I learned something about Italians that was very disturbing to me. And that is, you know, I understand sometimes you could be a little jealous, you know, oh, I wish I had what that guy had. You know, I get that. You know, you just see it. Sometimes it gets in you. But what would happen in that mob life is that somebody would say, I wish I had what that guy had, and I wish he didn't have.
yeah.
And that's the jealousy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the envy. That's the dangerous part, you know. I want it, but I don't want him to have it. And that's the kind of watch your back in that life, believe me. And I picked up on that pretty quick. You know, having success at a young age and being around that kind of treachery, I would say, you had to watch your back, really.
And how easy was it to be manipulated? Because I noticed that being young, sometimes you just don't realize what the old guys are doing. I mean, you believe they're looking up to you sometimes, or they're boosting your ego, but they're just using you to achieve what they want, or you really don't, you know, because you're younger and you're not experienced. So how easy was that?
Yeah. I'll be honest with Luke. I was very aware of that early on because I was very fortunate to have my father school me. And he schooled me well on that life. I mean, I treasure the times I sat in the visiting room because I got made while he was in prison. And I would sit in the visiting room with him and he would school me on that life. Watch out for this. And one thing I had is another thing that I teach to these young people. I was a good listener. I listened. If somebody, even till today, if somebody's smarter than me, I keep my mouth shut and I listen because I could always learn something. And because that life is so treacherous in a way and you had to watch your back, I would listen very carefully to what my father told me. You know, and he always told me, he said, Michael, this life is like a wheel. He said, it turns, meaning the guy that is on the bottom today, all of a sudden can be your boss tomorrow. So don't make enemies. You're going to make them without doing anything wrong. People are going to look at you. They're going to be envious of you. Don't make enemies. Be very careful who you side with, be side against. He always told me, if you have to pass judgment on somebody makes a mistake in that life and you're in a position where you have to pass judgment, he said, be very slow to convict somebody, very slow. He said, because people are going to remember that when it comes your turn, and it will come your turn. So, I mean, these things are so valuable when it's a matter of life and death at times. So, I mean, I learned early on not to be manipulated. And I don't think I was ever in a situation where I was.
Okay. So you advise, I mean, you always to treat people respectfully, because I know there is this respect in mob. I mean, you in an interview, I believe it was with Patrick Bet-David, you said that in a mob life, you never raise your voice to anybody. You don't insult anybody, no matter who they are, especially made guys, because you don't do it. I mean,
no, you can't do that. We had to be respectful to one another. If you were disrespectful, you were wrong right away, no matter what the situation was. From right, you can go to wrong in a second. So never disrespect. You know, questions I get asked all the time is like, you know, was Gotti tougher than everybody else? Was Roy DeMeo tougher than everybody else? These are mob guys that, you know, had reputations.
oh yeah,
And they said, were you afraid of these guys? And they said, look, you had to understand, if you're in that life, everybody was capable of doing harm to the other guy. We were all capable, or we wouldn't be part of that life. So we weren't in fear of that person. You know, we were in fear of making a mistake where you could be walked into a room and don't walk out again. I said, that's a fear that's real. I said, but everybody I know that tried to throw their chest out and had that reputation of being a real tough guy, they're all gone. They all got killed. Because if you're that kind of guy and you're not trustworthy and you're a loose cannon, the other guys say, who needs to deal with this guy? Let's put him to sleep. Let's get rid of him. Who needs to deal with him? You know, so nobody's going to deal with people like that. Eventually, you're pulling yourself down. You know, you become your own worst enemy. Everybody I know that tried to act tough or was just treacherous, they didn't last because nobody wanted to deal with them. They made one mistake, they were gone. That was it.
So never scream at anybody? What would you advise me? If I get pissed off, can I scream at somebody or no? It's like never, ever.
Look, it's best not to lose your temper. I mean, I have at times. I'm not going to say I haven't, but it's best to control yourself. I mean, in that life, a made guy cannot scream at another made guy. You can't do it. You just can't. Even if you're a boss and you're talking to a soldier, you disrespect that guy, you better hope that guy never has his turn with you. You know, because bosses don't last, you know, that in that life. So you better be careful. Respect is important, even if it kills you. Just be respectful, be firm, be definite, but be respectful.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for this interview. So it's past 9 p.m. for me, and I don't want to abuse your time. So thank you so much. My audience is going to enjoy this so much, and it was great. It was great. It doesn't come often to talk to somebody like you. I believe you have a big heart, and that's why I asked you for an interview. I liked you, your previous interviews, and I thought you had something to share, and it turned out I was right. So
I appreciate that. And, I'm glad we have this relationship meeting, like this on Zoom. It's amazing what we can do today. But let's stay in touch, because if I do come that way when all this is over, maybe we can meet up, have a cup of coffee.
Absolutely. Actually, I was thinking, first of all, you can promote your business now if you want. And if you come to Dubai, or if I come to LA, you have a totally paid for steak, wine, whatever you like. And maybe we can have another interview in person or something. But yes, let's keep in touch. Just tell us where my students can find your stuff.
What I'd like to do now is, like I said, we're now engaging in this new venture. It's new. I've been doing it my whole life, basically. But now, in the last 20 years, so many people come to me for advice on leadership and business and even personal issues. And, I give it out. So now we're going to be doing it, I don't want to say as a business, but as just as a life extension of what I do. And so people can join my crew, get involved with me, stay in touch with me by going on this website. It's join.michaelfranzese.com. You come on, you'll get a nice gift from us, and then you'll see what the process is for us to engage. And hopefully I can share some wisdom with you, help you business-wise, lifestyle-wise. And we've had so many people come aboard. And we're going to be going into this in a big way as soon as this lockdown ends. So join.michaelfranzese.com. I'm all over social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So get in touch, and we'll become friends, and we'll take it from there.
Good. Thank you, Michael. And I'll either see you in Dubai or in California.
That's the deal. You take care now, and stay safe and stay healthy throughout this.
Thank you.
All right, buddy.
Bye-bye
now.
Okay, let me stop the recording.